Welcome, Pocket Vision Fantasy Football, where today we're going to talk about, guess what? Anthony Richardson's back. We're going to talk about the Lions. We're going to talk about Taysom Hill. We're going to get into our weekly best bets for the Thursday night game and some finally crystal ball bust and crystal ball picks. So before we get over to Eric with his take a look at the clip.
Let's go. Anthony Richardson is back. His first game back as a starter. 0 interceptions, 272 yards passing, 20 for 30, 2 rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown. His confidence is there. They're giving him the ball. They're letting him run it a little more, which is really nice to see. Also, the end of that game where he had the ball, he had to drive down the field with just a couple minutes left and score a touchdown for them to win that game. They did it. They scored the touchdown. They leave a couple seconds on, and Aaron Rodgers can't come back and beat him. But what I like to see is he was able to make those layups, and he was able to minimize some of his mistakes. He did fumble the ball a couple times. He did do some little shovel passes that were a little dangerous, but he kept the mistakes down. And if he can keep doing that and keep learning, he's going to keep his job. So this is the quarterback you want in fantasy football. Someone that's going to get rushing touchdowns, someone that's going to get rushing attempts, and still be able to pass the ball. Now, that was against one team. We'll see how they go against Detroit this week. But let's say keep the ball rolling, Anthony Richardson. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, with it being one game, I'm
back.
skeptical. Yeah.
Go for it, Marcus.
Sorry, Zach. I would say from a fantasy perspective, he's definitely somebody who showed why he was being drafted as, I think, QB5 earlier this year with that game. I will say it's one game. It's against the Jets, who are clearly a bad football team. Their defense is not what it was last year. From a real football perspective, I'm just not sure. But we'll see. It would be really nice that the Colts, go back to having some hope, because if you don't have a quarterback, then you really have no hope at all. But we'll see what he can do against the Lions. Not saying he has to go out there and win, but as long as he goes out there and looks competent, then we can say, okay, maybe that few weeks off actually did him some good.
Yeah, so first of all, back from what exactly? I mean, was he ever super good? I don't know. But he definitely, had a really good game on Sunday from a fantasy perspective. If you have that goal line touchdown ability, that's a guy that I want to have. So not sold on him long term. Not a guy I would trade for in Dynasty, but I think he should not be on free agents for redraft leagues.
Yeah, I mean his upside is huge. I mean, if you're in a spot where you're an underdog to win in fantasy and you have a chance to play Anthony Richardson, he gives you a chance. He can put up 30, 40 fantasy points. I think you're just going to see a lot of inconsistency. I mean, now we probably have, I would imagine, somewhat close to 10 games as a sample size for him now, and we've seen all ends of the spectrum. We've seen him do terrible, and we've seen him blow up. So I think that's going to be what it's like going forward. I think he's going to have some single-digit fantasy point games, and I think he's going to have some eruptions.
Do we like this long-term? Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
He was drafted high for a reason, because he has the ability to break fantasy football. He has the ability to get those rushing touchdowns and throw the ball deep. He can throw the deep ball. Now all he has to do is minimize his mistakes. He's still young. He's still learning. And I think he played very consistent this last game. If he can just not turn the ball over, that's all I can ask for him. I'd rather punt the ball than see him throw a pick six or anything like that. So as long as he stays safe and keeps making those layups, and that's what we saw this last game. He was able to hit the deep balls. He was able to make the splash plays, but he's also able to hit they needed 7 yards, and he was able to get it. He didn't overthrow them and throw a pick six or throw an interception. I just want to see him clean up a little bit of his fumbles, but this is a quarterback I want in fantasy. I just want to see a little more consistency long term. So let's watch another couple games and see how it goes.
How do you guys feel about
stay healthy too?
Yeah, that and the Colts with the AFC South. What are we thinking there? I mean, they're 2 games out behind the
The
Texans. I mean,
And
Texans
they're
look
playing the
bad.
Lions this
No,
week too.
Marcus says no.
I
Zach
would
says
I
say
think
no. They've already been swept by the Texans. It doesn't matter how the Texans have looked. Their schedule, I think, just having that cushion. I mean, I don't know. We saw Jacksonville choke it away last year. Maybe that's just how it is in the AFC South. I think ultimately that having swept the Colts, that tiebreaker means the Colts gonna have to make up 3 more games. Um, very, very unlikely. As a Colts fan, that would be great. As a betting person, no, but maybe I'm just able to hedge my happiness if something like that happened. Then I don't need the money. I'd already be happy. So
I just think
well, I
with
don't know
the
what the odds are.
inconsistency that we're going to get from AR, like they're not going to string together a bunch of wins. Like he's still going to make those mistakes. He's still a young player. Like they're not going to be able to string together the wins it's going to take to get them back to the top of the
Yeah,
division.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. I definitely think the Texans are going to hold on, but the Texans have not been instilling a whole lot of confidence. Even Monday night, they won the game, and the final score was pretty big in their favor. But um, I still didn't think Stroud looked as good as we saw him look last year. I think he's having a little bit of a sophomore slump, and you know I think they're heading the wrong direction. So
And
I'm
really,
sure.
even the defense. I mean, they gave up what 350, 400 yards to rush. I mean, it was. I mean, they didn't score a lot, but they were moving the ball without any problem.
Colts are
yeah, I don't know
plus
about that. I mean, he had
1,400.
the Turpin,
Colts are plus
yeah,
1,400 to
plus
what?
1,400. So you
To
only
win the AFC
need
South?
like
Yeah.
yeah. So that your probability that this needs to happen is like somewhere between 5 and 10%. So it's for it to be a good bet. So I mean, it's not like obviously I don't think the Colts are going to win it, but do they have at least an 8% chance? I don't know, maybe. Like that's all you'd probably need without doing the math.
Yeah.
So
Well, we'll see what happens. Moving on. Things are getting crazy down in Detroit.
Yeah. The Lions, for the first time ever in franchise history, are the current Super Bowl favorites. They are plus 350 now. Against Jacksonville, not a very good team, but when you play not good teams, you want to go out and dominate them, and that's exactly what the Lions did. Scored on their first 7 possessions, and just kept going. I do think they wanted to get Goff's confidence up there while they were still chucking it in the fourth quarter, but that's more of an inside story for our group. But yeah, the Lions, they look like the clearly the best team in the NFL. If you can go out and 2 weeks ago throw 5 interceptions on the road and still win against a team that has 7 wins in the NFL, you must be pretty good. Things are just clicking. Their offense is very, very difficult to stop as long as Goff isn't turning the ball over. And their defense can also carry them when they need to as well. I think some people would say, oh, Philadelphia is also kind of that dark horse to win the NFC, or at least a contender right there with them. I don't necessarily see it with Philadelphia. But it's just crazy living in 2024 that we're saying the Lions are arguably the best team in the NFL and currently the favorites to win the Super Bowl. Just what, 2, 3 years ago, they were the toilet of the NFL, right? And I wasn't sure about Dan Gamble and biting kneecaps, but clearly it works. Um, and it's just it's kind of fun to see really that this Lions team's so good. And from a fantasy perspective, if you have players on this team, they're going to probably carry you to a fantasy championship, right, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, how many teams have two running backs that are? I imagine they're both comfortably in the top 10 because they both seem to get at least one touchdown every week. I guess this is pretty crazy how they're feeding all these mouths in Detroit. There's just so many points to go around.
well, it
When you
helps when
score
you're
50
playing your
twice.
starters up 35 points in the fourth quarter. I think that helps spread the wealth a little bit. I definitely agree that the Lions should probably be the favorites at this point. They look like the best team in the NFL, especially with the Chiefs losing. But with that said, I would not bet them at plus 350. Jason pulled up the odds there a minute ago, and I saw Philadelphia at plus 900, and then I think San Francisco like plus 1,400. I think those are better bets. Just the playoffs are so random. Anything can happen. I don't feel good about anybody. I looks at their plus 420 here. I don't feel anybody good. Once you get odds that low as far as winning the Super Bowl, um, just because like it only takes one game, you're out. So
Yeah,
maybe
no, I
around a
would agree with
20%
that.
chance for the Lions to win.
Yeah, even
Yeah, I
the Chiefs at plus 500. I mean, that is a hard team to beat, even when they don't even look like they're playing well. They finally lost last week, but that was against a good Bills team, which is you're going to be playing good teams in the playoffs. But the Chiefs, just like they don't always look good in the regular season, but they are really tough to beat in the playoffs.
I do like the Lions better than the Chiefs for those odds, just simply because I think the AFC is a little tougher at the top. The Bills and the Ravens, and then the Steelers are great too. Whereas I think the NFC, I think the NFC wild cards are strong, but maybe the Eagles can give the Lions a run for the money. The Niners are struggling, but in theory they could be tough. But I think the Lions have an easier path, so I take them ahead of the Chiefs for roughly the same odds.
yeah, and I
I
would
agree with the Niners. I actually think that's my favorite bet of all of them. The Niners at plus 1400. Like McCaffrey's
Yeah,
going to get back into the swing of things, and that defense is. I think they're capable of playing better than they have been.
I'll take the Niners Super Bowl plus 1400 ahead of Colts AFC South plus 1400.
Yeah, it's just I know Zach knows this statistic. There's only 3 NFC teams that haven't made it to the NFC Championship game. Not one, just made an appearance in the NFC Championship game since the 2000. Washington, Dallas, and Detroit. And I think Detroit ends that. If they get the 1 seed, I think they'll have a very favorable first game. And then they'll get whoever makes it out of the more likely tougher side of the NFC bracket. Agree with you on the AFC. It is completely wide open. It's going to be somewhat random. I think in the AFC, anybody can come out because they're all good and there's no elite super team. Yeah, really, it's really cool to see the Lions turn it around. Gives hope to other teams, I think, or franchises.
I mean,
For sure.
how many Thanksgiving Day games have they lost? I feel like I've grown up just watching them get massacred on Thanksgiving for so many times. Even when they had Stafford, I think they even lost those games when they had Megatron too.
Yeah, they
It'll be
weren't
Yeah,
interesting.
like a great team even when they had Megatron. They weren't.
Or even go back to Barry
Maybe this year,
Sanders. I
maybe
mean, you have two
they'll massacre
like
somebody.
arguably best running back and receivers of all time in consecutive like decades, and you still
Like
don't do anything with it.
when Marcus put the line in the lower thirds or whatever, I was like, I read it like they haven't been in this like Super Bowl favorite in a long time. Like I didn't read like the whole. For some reason I didn't read it. I was like, well, yeah, probably back when Barry Sanders. I look back and I'm like, oh no, never. And the NFL's they've been a team since 1930, so that's
Yeah,
quite the drought.
I don't know that they've ever really been considered like a really good team. So
I think this
No,
is the
it's good.
best. And I just remember like my whole life playing fantasy football, literally with almost without any break of just like if they're playing the Lions, it's a good matchup. Start your guys against the Lions. Like just
Well,
a terrible defense.
I did think when they made that deal with Stafford that I thought eventually it would work out for the Lions because it was just such a massive haul. And I don't know if you guys remember, but Goff was coming off a pretty good season. Like he had a good season. I think they lost in the playoffs, and then the next year he was just terrible. So it wasn't like he was like horrible consistently. He just had a bad season, and they just moved him, and obviously
it's
it worked
just
out.
another example of a quarterback changing scenery that a lot of people might have given up on and turns it around.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is,
yeah, I
when
think
you
a
think
lot of
about that
people
too,
were.
go ahead.
I
Go
just think
ahead.
a lot of people are under the impression that Goff was a product of Sean McVay, and
Sure.
that's why that trade was made. But I also think you follow the draft and in teams trading for draft capital, and you make good picks that surfaces up, and you're gonna have a good team.
Sure. All right, Marty, we're gonna throw it at you. Here's your video.
Just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Guys, how about Taysom Hill? I mean, what a day. He had 3 rushing yards, well over 100 rushing yards, 8 receptions. just absolutely crushed it. And the question that a lot of people are going to have going forward is, can you start him in your fantasy football lineup? And I think that the answer, I'm just going to start with my opinion here. I think the answer is that if you have an elite tight end, you're not going to play him, because these games, like we've seen him have these massive, massive games before, and he goes right back to scoring 5-7 points the next week. But if you don't have an elite tight end, almost no other, very few, even the elite tight ends have upside of the kind of game that he just had. And it's not like this is the only time Taysom Hill has ever had a game this big. I mean, he's done this before. So I think that I think he's probably a borderline top 5 tight end just for that reason. And his involvement, he throws the ball, he runs it, and he gets receptions. I mean, there's 3 different ways he can get points.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that if you have Taysom Hill, you're probably starting him. Definitely, this was his 99.9 percentile outcome last week, but other top 10 tight ends might include Kyle Pitts, whose floor is 0 points this year, which, Taysom Hill's floor is probably something close to that as well. The truth is just not a whole lot of trustworthy tight ends. So the fact that I don't necessarily trust Taysom Hill isn't going to cause me to sit him when, like you said, he runs the ball. He can run in touchdowns on the goal line. The only tight end that's going to do that. So I'm not going to start him over, Kelsey or Kittle or Bowers.
McBride has a rushing touchdown.
McBride, yes. He doesn't have a receiving touchdown, though. So, yeah, maybe if you don't have a top 5 tight end, then, Taysom Hill, he's definitely, worth a gamble at that point.
Yeah, I'm in a best ball league, and he is one of my prime go get your players in a best ball league where you don't have to set your lineup. If he gets you 0 points, it's fine. But when he scores these 50-point weeks, he just automatically makes a spot into your lineup and you win that week. And that's the type of receivers and players that I want in a best ball league. So I am very happy to have him in that league. Need more weeks of hit like this out of him for that type of league. But it is a little more challenging.
Quarterback eligible?
Is he quarterback eligible?
He's QB tight end in most.
In the best ball league, is he quarterback eligible?
He's a tight end. He's a tight end.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So he just flexes right into your tight end spot if he does well. If he doesn't,
I know in some leagues
you don't start him.
In some platforms, he's QB and tight end. So if he's QB and tight end, then it'd even give you a little bit more upside.
Yeah, you could play with the quarterback.
I would agree with what Marty said. Unless you have the uber elite tight ends like Bowers, Kittle, even McBride, I'd be starting Taysom Hill. Like you guys are saying, the trust part of it, I'm not starting Taysom Hill thinking he's going to give me double-digit fantasy points, but I know that upside is always there, and I'm not going to get upset when he gets a 5-pointer because, that's what could happen. But I think the way that the Saints are, in terms of where they're at in their season, all the injuries that they've had, they need opportunities or players like Hill to score points. Yes, him scoring a bunch of those touchdowns, a 75-yard rushing touchdown to end the game, like stuff like that's not going to happen. But the opportunities are going to be there, just from a pure, like I said, injury standpoint with the Saints. They need somebody to go in there and do that. Kamara isn't Derrick Henry. He isn't going to get every single goal line carry. And, Taysom Hill's been doing this for multiple years now where they get the ball in the red zone. He gets one chance. They're not going to run him 3 straight plays, but he usually gets one chance. And those are players that you want in your lineup that just have that ability to get those high value touches. So I don't think you can trust him for 44, but I do think you can start him pretty comfortably. Unless you have a top 5 tight end in a really good matchup.
No, I choked it away.
Don't forget the ultimate upside.
Go ahead, Zach.
The ultimate upside is he actually plays quarterback. I mean, probably won't happen, but if it does, you get a quarterback tight end.
What if he ever got the starting quarterback gig and you got to play him a tight end?
But he's not going to get that on the fly in New Orleans.
He's had it before.
Yeah, it's unlikely.
He's played a full game of quarterback.
They're not going to come out and be like, Carr's injured. Maybe that would be the case, but not.
Well, we've already seen that. Carr's injured, and he wasn't the guy. So
yeah.
We have seen it from Taysom Hill, but not this year.
He might be the third man. He might be the third man up.
Yeah.
I do agree with Marcus
There's
though.
some universe.
Some of that stuff that going on in New Orleans, though, it's like they're gonna just let him run it a little bit more with the changes they got over there.
He even had return yards, so he's doing it all.
Yeah, he
You
does.
just
He gets
want
it
players
all.
like that.
Quadruple threat.
Zach made the perfect analogy. Like Kyle Pitts is a good tight end, but his floor is 0. You think you just have a good tight end and you just blindly start him every week. That's
I'm
not
playing
good for your
Hill
lineup.
over Pitts.
Yeah.
Sure. All right, guys, moving on to best bets of the week for the Thursday night game. We got Pittsburgh at Cleveland. Prime this week.
Pittsburgh.
Throw it over to Eric.
Yes. And my best bet of the week is Pat Fryermuth at over 1.5 catches. Looking back at this entire year, he's played a total of 10 games, and he's hit the over in every single one of the 10 games. Almost every betting odds usually you see where sometimes they don't hit the game. He does have a little more competition at targets here with Darnell Washington at tight end. He's got four targets the last game, so he's got a little bit more competition, but he's hit it every single time. Vegas has him hitting the over. I will be betting that bet.
Moving to Marcus.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to go with a defensive touchdown to be scored. It's a Thursday night game between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. I just think there's going to be several opportunities for this to happen. More so with Jameis Winston, more likely throwing like a pick or something like that. I think he's nearly minus 200 to throw an interception. We could get TJ Watt on a sack strip fumble situation. And even Russell Wilson likes to make mistakes, as we saw last week against the Ravens, him just throwing up a ridiculous ball in the end zone that could end up costing them the game. I also like a bet that I couldn't find the exact odds for, but I know it's there every week, is no points scored in any quarter. Normally that's like a plus 250 bet. I assume the odds are probably going to be a little bit worse than that in a game like this. But if you can find a bet like that, typically on DraftKings, I do like that because I anticipate a low-scoring game, and you could definitely get a quarter where neither team scores. But to make it official, I like that plus 180 to have an offensive touchdown.
I like Jameis Winston, 225 or more passing yards at plus 120. One thing you can bet on Jameis Winston do is sling it. We saw him have almost 400 passing yards last week. This is a much tougher defense. Probably not going to get anywhere close to that. But I do think the Steelers win this game. Winston's going to be trying to make something happen, and he might throw a couple of interceptions on the way to that 225 passing yards. But I do think he gets there, and it's plus money for a passing yards total for Winston. I'll take it.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, you can see he's throwing the ball. Jason pulled up the game log, 3+ times, over 40 yards on all his starts, averaging way over that as well. But anyway, on to mine. I've got Najee Harris for 80 rushing yards at plus 155. He's in Pittsburgh's 8 wins this season. He's averaging 81, and they're probably going to win this one. So it's not going to be, he just has to do what he does in an average win. And it's plus 155. I think that's pretty favorable. And Cleveland is allowing 131 rushing yards per game, and that's only good for 24th in the NFL.
Sweet. This next one, new idea, guys. We want to talk about teams with that dog in them, or teams that are underdogs that could win. These are 2 games I like this week. New England, Miami, plus 275 division game. I always think that's could happen. And Detroit, Indy. I think that one's a little harder to believe, but I just think that there's so much variance with Anthony Richardson's game log that it could happen. Again, not saying that it will, but those are the games that stuck out to me. Anything about those games or other games that stuck out to you guys?
I do want to give out a shout out to you, Zach. I was going to say, I want to give out a shout out to Jason. He was the one telling us last week Seattle was going to go into San Francisco and win. So props to Jason there. And I kind of can see why you like New England and Miami. Not something I would bet just because I don't think it's going to happen, but definitely a division game. Those games tend to be closer. As far as the Detroit Indianapolis game, it is at Indy. Being a Colts fan, maybe I think they have a little bit slightly more chance than they really do. But wouldn't it be the Lions to finally be Super Bowl favorites, and then their first game as Super Bowl favorites, they lose? Um, you know, not that that's kind of like analytical stuff, but more of just like this, or just these things happen in the NFL. Everybody's going to be on the Lions thinking like, oh yeah, Lions pro. Yeah, I'll put that as one of my 2 or 3 team money line parlays. And then a team like Indianapolis at home just goes in there and messes with it. We saw, I think it was a couple of years ago where the Colts beat the Chiefs at home. I feel like the Colts kind of do this once a year where they play a really good team and they beat them. The problem with the Colts is they always struggle to rack up wins against teams they should beat and they end up losing. So, these are just reasons why I could see the Colts winning, just because it just seems like that's what typically happens once a year at home. They always play a really good team and beat them, or at least give them a game for sure. So, definitely could see Indianapolis doing that.
Yeah, I like this bet at plus 320 because the Colts, no one has beat them down all season. Their biggest loss, they lost by 10 points. No one's beaten them by more than 10 all season. So, I mean, I feel like they're going to be in the game. They have at least they should have a decent chance of that. And they actually broke the record this season for the most consecutive one possession games. I think they got up to like 9 or 10 to start the season, one possession games. So I do think that they can hang into the game, and then it's the NFL. Anything can happen in a close game.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think those are
absolutely.
two of the.
NFL, no team's ever completely out of it. Like every team, has a chance of going in. These players are extremely good. Even the worst team in the league, any given Sunday can win a game. Between these two matchups, though, I would rather bet on New England to beat Miami. Marcus, I know you said you wouldn't bet on New England because you don't think they're going to win. You only really need like a 27% chance for New England to win to make this bet. And I think Drake May is playing really well. And I just don't like ever trust Miami and or Tua. So
Concussion City right
I
there.
like New England here. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Miami. I mean, they did beat the Raiders last week, but like, wouldn't it like it just a guarantee? Just call hike, let Tyreek Hill run 50 yards down the field and throw him a touchdown. Like, what happened to that? I feel like the Dolphins are like. I mean, they did score against the Raiders, but it's just like they don't have easy points anymore. I don't know what happened to that offense.
Yeah, their offense is not clicking as good as it did last year.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's. Here's another thing I just want to talk about, just because we're partway through the season. But are there any mid-season takeaways, sports betting, fantasy related, that you've come to a realization this season?
Yeah, actually, I am an ageist. I have been discarding some of these older players, especially running backs, way too early. Guys like Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, among others, especially wide receivers like Mike Evans and
Yeah,
um,
James Conner.
Chris Godwin, other James Conner. Maybe not as much this year, but definitely the last couple seasons. I think we get at kind of this idea of, oh, I'd rather jump off a guy a year too early than a year too late. But I think we're starting to jump off guys years too early. And then instead of taking something that's more of a proven asset, we're drafting, rookie guys or second, third year players that we're projecting like them to make a leap, and they just don't do it. And that's actually riskier than taking a proven older player and thinking they might take a step back. So I think that's, I mean, especially when you look at, you know, the history, last 20 years of fantasy football. 20 years ago, guys like Larry Johnson have 400 carry seasons. I remember Sean Alexander carrying the ball over 40 times on a Monday Night Football game. Now players are rarely breaching 20 carries. I think that's finally starting to pay dividends, where these running backs are having longer playing careers. And the classic strategy was jump off a guy running backs early because they're wearing down, whereas now that window is extended. So I think that's an adjustment I want to make, in future seasons.
I agree, and I
Well
think that
said.
that's something that there's a lot of reason to believe that that can continue into the future. I mean, not only, they've changed the rules to keep players safer, and just training methods, injury prevention methods have changed. I mean, look at the NBA. You've got LeBron playing well at 40, Chris Paul's playing well. I mean, we're just seeing longer careers out of athletes in general across the board. So I do think that this is a trend that's not just a one-off. I think we're going to continue to see this.
Here's the crazy stat too. I just pulled up too. You know who leads the league in carries this year?
Jonathan
Joe
Taylor.
Mixon.
Barkley.
Derrick Henry.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Taylor's hurt.
Crazy.
And
No, I
he's
guess
getting,
Mixon got
and
injured.
he's getting,
Yeah.
and Henry is getting 6 yards every time. Look at that, 6 yards per carry. Saquon 5.8 yards per carry. These guys are crushing it.
Yeah, those two top guys right there.
Okay. Kamara's another guy that I wrote off like 2 or 3 years ago, and he's out there having another really good season.
A lot of the YouTube fantasy football experts all offseason were telling you, avoid Derrick Henry, avoid Barkley. They're old. They're switching teams. This, that, blah, 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 blah. Instead, take these wide receivers like Marvin Harrison Jr., who is talented, but like you said, Zach, you're taking a rookie that we've never seen play before over these guys. And it's just, we're seeing maybe it's just a 1 year sample size, but we've been seeing wide receivers just being driven up the board in fantasy drafts lately. And a lot of people are like, well, wide receivers are safer. And maybe just this year, you can't just say, oh, that's 100% not true. But like, we're clearly seeing that wide receivers can get hurt or have situations where they're not, bust proof, or these running backs clearly can be good. So I think it might just be more of who do you think is just going to be better? Maybe it's just a little bit of luck. I think we've just seen that, especially this year. It was just nothing but wide receivers up top, McCaffrey, and then all wide receivers. And that's just what we'll see in 2025. Do the running backs make another return? Is it just this another cycle? But I think it's a good example of both positions can get hurt.
I do think there could be some
I'm not
research.
sure that.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, there's definitely some research that we could do, but I don't think this is like the first year that I've noticed this. I mean, last year, James Conner had a really good season. He's a guy that I didn't want to touch. Aaron Jones was a guy that I traded away in Dynasty a couple of years ago, thinking that, trying to predict his demise, A.J. Dillon coming in. He's having another good season in Minnesota. So I don't think this is like, oh, wow, this is the first year we're seeing it. This is the first year I'm going to start trusting it. I thought maybe last year was like, okay, this is kind of wonky, but, go back to predicting the younger breakout guys. But I think this is definitely something to start putting some trust in going forward.
I mean, the truth is, I think it's just extremely hard. Like, when I look at this right here, I mean, so against what Zach's saying earlier about the ageism thing. Okay, here Brock Bowers is. He's number 6 in targets. Obviously, he's a rookie. But that's not the same for everybody. And Malik Neighbors. So these two guys are top targets. But then you have, the people you'd expect like CeeDee Lamb and Drake. But then you have people like Darnell Mooney. Where's he at? Yeah, Darnell Mooney.
Cortland Sutton down there at 9.
Yeah, I mean, Cortland Sutton. Well, I mean, there's just so many variables. Like, what team did they get traded to? Who's their coach? What kind of scheme? Like, obviously, Peyton doing that dink and dunk is huge for Cortland Sutton. I bet you these depth of targets not very deep.
Well, it's number 10 there, Wan'Dale Robinson. His depth of target's got to be very low.
I know, but I say
it's like 9% there.
But is that 2 Giants receivers in the top 11 in targets on there?
Yeah, but the team's terrible.
Two in the top 10.
Well,
they're passing
not
the ball.
that we need to get into it. Eric's going to say Neighbors and Harrison, blah, blah, blah. Neighbors is just a great example of talent doesn't necessarily matter. It's just opportunities. Like, I'm not going to say Neighbors is extremely more talented than Marvin Harrison Jr., but it is clear that Neighbors got fed long handoffs, like we've talked about, like CD Lamb in Dallas. You're just getting a 7-yard handoff down the field because it's easy. And Kyler Murray doesn't do stuff like that to inflate Marvin Harrison Jr. stats. But we don't have to get into that. It's a different show. Another takeaway that I wanted to talk about with fantasy football, we've talked about it a lot. It's probably not even worth opening the can of worms. I think a lot of people need to realize it is much more luck than skill. Even when things that we say, we act like we know what we're talking about, but we can't predict everything. So I try to, from a mental standpoint, not to invest so much emotional energy into something that I can't control. But I think we've seen it this year. This injuries, you can't do anything about it. Rashee Rice is a great example. Like everybody was loving that. You got a great deal on him. He lasted 1 month, gone. It's just
Expired.
I would say we don't have to really get into it because it's probably just to make people mad. Another thing I would say is identify the teams. Identify the teams that are going to score points.
Like, there's other stuff better than this.
Yeah. Something else we can talk about is identify the teams that are going to score a bunch of points. Like Marty, we're in a league where Marty has Goff and St. Brown and Gibbs. You have them all. They score 50 points every week. You're just scoring a million fantasy points. You can't 100% know what offense is going to do that, but a lot of people did think the Lions were going to be really good. They have a whole bunch of home games. Even when they're on the road, they're playing in domes and inside. It's just set up really well. I think that's another strategy that maybe moving forward I'm going to really hone in on and just stack. I don't even get who cares if you start this draft with St. Brown and Gibbs, right? If they're on the same team, they're going to score a million points. They're going to get there. So maybe just being more cognizant of that, of drafting players, if it's a tiebreaker, to pick the better offense, not maybe who you think's the better talent.
Well, I definitely agree with the whole talent thing. I definitely put too much weight in on who I think's more talented versus the situation. But I will challenge you a little bit on the picking players on a good offense idea, because ideally you do want to pick players who are on the best offenses. But in what our main league, I have Devontae Smith, good offense. Jameson Williams, good offense. Jordan Addison, pretty good offense. These are all like number 2 wide receivers. In some games, they just get ignored, where they're not getting the targets because AJ Brown gets the targets, or Amon-Ra St. Brown gets the targets, or Justin Jefferson gets the targets. So sometimes and this is one of my points with George Pickens earlier, in our preseason show, and why I like George Pickens, even though he was on what we thought was going to be a bad offense. Sometimes the volume of targets is worth more than like a smaller amount of targets on a better offense. So it's it's I don't think it's as easy just to say, oh, I want guys on the Lions, I don't want guys on some other worse offense. If the volume's there, then that could still be a better pick, just because some of these peripheral outside receiver, number 2 receivers just have some really bad games.
Yeah, it really comes down to how lucky you are at identifying what offense is going to be elite this year, like the Lions. The Lions were even the offense you wanted last year. So it's really back-to-back years. You just wanted Lions, and you can't, like you said, the Eagles have a good offense. But we've seen this kind of before with the Eagles where they score points, but it's usually on the ground. I do know that the Eagles, for most of the season, were like the worst scoring offense in the first quarter. So there's a whole 25% of the game where they're not doing anything. But no, I mean, I think we're both right, Zach. Like you said, you can't ignore everything. You got to look at opportunities. It's just really difficult to really know what these coaches are going to do. And what's
Is it more difficult
out.
to do that or predict what offense is going to be good? Because I would have thought that Philadelphia was going to have one of the better offenses this year. And I think their offense is fine. But Devontae Smith's had some tough weeks recently.
Yeah, well, I think
the thing is he doesn't throw the ball. That's the truth.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Eagles, they just run the ball. And all of their touchdowns are runs, and if they do throw one, it's probably going to AJ Brown. That's probably just what's hurting.
Yeah,
Smith.
I mean that's just my point. Obviously, if you get Saquon Barkley or AJ Brown, that's great. But you have to take those guys in the first round. Same with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs. You're not getting those guys past round two. Like, yeah, these like high usage players, they're on these awesome offenses are definitely what we want, but they're all going in the first, second round. If you want to get like the number 2 wide receiver on a good offense, you can get that later. But as some of the examples I pointed out, that's far from consistent. I mean, Jameson Williams has had games where but there was 1 week where Jameson Williams and Devontae Smith combined for, I think, negative receiving yards. Um, so like some of these number 2 wide receivers in really good offenses just aren't are hard to trust.
Any other closing arguments, guys, or questions?
Well, I
Eric?
will say, on the ageist, ageist position wise, we see, what I see is older running backs sticking around later, and younger receivers tending to make a difference right away. We've seen some of these, Jackson Smith, the Jigba, second-year player. Now he's getting the chance. Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers, some of these younger in the receiving options making a role right away when some of the younger running backs aren't getting that chance. They ain't getting that opportunity. Benson is a running back that we thought we'd have get some opportunity. No, the veteran's staying in place, and as long as there's no injury to that running back, the older running backs are running away with the job.
It's good
And another
observation because it
thing,
used to be the opposite of that.
it did.
Yeah,
And
and
another
literally the
thing,
entire list of rookie running backs busted this year, all of them so far.
and maybe that's not their time for 2 or 3 years once some of these guys are really losing a step at running
Well,
back.
it's correlated, right?
Derrick Henry at 35 years old, still out there crushing it. Maybe we'll
I think
see.
he's only like 28 or
35.
29.
I don't know. Well, maybe he's got another
Derrick
5 or
Henry, I
6
think he's going to
years.
be 31 this year. I think he's going to be 31 this year, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
okay.
He said he's going to play to the same age as Tom Brady.
Yeah, he said he's going to break Tom Brady's record.
Well, he'll still be 6'3",
He said he-
250, maybe
He
260 or
said
70 at
he
that
said he's
point.
going to go to Tampa
He's got to
Bay
keep
and win
that
a Super
speed
Bowl
up.
there.
All right, guys, let's move on to the crystal ball
And
bust of the week. Unless you have something, Eric. You have something you
Well,
can say.
another thing that's for this year, I wanted to see how the kickoff returns kind of maybe played a role, and if they, help some of these receivers or running backs maybe become fantasy relevant that had no fantasy relevancy, but that's not really the case. We just don't see a lot of kick returns or anything making any difference with the rule change versus where it was and where it is now.
I think they'll change that next year too. All right.
But on to the crystal ball bust of the week. I have all of the receivers for the Colts, even though I love Anthony Richardson and I want to see him do well. When he does well, the receivers do not do well because he is a thief. He steals the touchdowns. He gets those rushing touchdowns and gives them to nobody else. I also think he hurts Jonathan Taylor. He steals Jonathan Taylor's potential touchdowns. When Joe Flacco's in there, they're not letting Joe Flacco running QB sneaks or anything like that. No, they're not giving him even the chance to run the ball. Anthony Richardson gets those chances. He steals the touchdowns from the receivers because I don't think they trust him throwing around the red zone. So they just want him to run it. And now they're seeing, do they have anything with him? I think before they were protecting him. They didn't want him to take a hit. Now they're like, all right, we got to see if we're all in. Are we all in on this guy? Can he do it? Well, now we're going to let him run the ball and see if he can. And that's what they did last week with his 10 rush attempts. And he got 2 in the end zone. So I think he's a thief. I think he's going to steal touchdowns from the receivers. There's not one receiver, Downs, Pittman, Alec Pierce. There's not one receiver that I want to put in there and I feel comfortable about. I don't feel comfortable with any of those receivers in the lineup unless Flacco gets to play quarterback once again.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Josh Downs is my bust last week. He had a pretty good game, but that's still not something that I'm going to rely on and count. Maybe I entered my. Oh, here it is. Okay, so DeAndre Swift is my bust of the week. I think he's ranked around a top 20 running back this week on ESPN. Going up against the Vikings, one of the toughest teams to go up against as a running back, is just not something that I prefer to do. So if you have another guy you can put in there, I think that's a good move. The Bears offense in general, I think trending the wrong direction. I thought there for a minute Caleb was going to start breaking out, but I think he's kind of gone back to taking a step back recent weeks. So preferably no Bears for me, especially DeAndre Swift.
Alrighty, and for me, it is going to be a pick that could blow up in my face. A guy that we just talked about still has the fountain of youth. It's going to be Derrick Henry. The main reason is the Chargers are an elite ground defense, meaning that they don't give up production on the ground. They might give up some receiving production to running backs, but on the season, only James Conner has scored more than 9 fantasy points just from rushing production. And we know Derrick Henry doesn't get anything through the air. He does typically score a touchdown. Most likely, he'll probably score a touchdown again. But if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's going to be, I think, a very bad fantasy play. Even in PPR leagues, I think ESPN has him ranked 5th. I just don't see him getting into the top 10. Even if he scores a touchdown, he's not a top 10, probably not even top 15 running back, unless it's just a really down week, or I guess there are a lot of teams on bye, so maybe it's not that hard. But I just don't see it with Derrick Henry this week. He's going to have to score multiple touchdowns for you to be happy, because he's not going to be having a lot of yards on the ground, and that receiving production is just going to make it very difficult. So for me, Derrick Henry is my bust of the week.
I hope you're wrong, Marcus. I have a lot of Derrick Henry, but I do see the points. I agree, and I'll add that his carries have been trending down a little bit. I feel like they're trying to save him for the playoffs a little bit. But my bust for the week is C.J. Stroud. He's going up against the Tennessee Titans, who only allow 164 passing yards per game. That is the fewest among all teams in the NFL. This is also, I think they're going to win the game. I think they'll win the game somewhat easily. I think they'll at least control the game and be running a lot. And Jason pulled up the graphic earlier with the carries by running back, and Mixon was 7th or 8th on the list, but he missed 3 full games and then half of another game. And he was only 25, 26 carries off of first. So if you just give him that extra 3.5 games he missed, I think he would be easily number one. So because that would only, if he's just getting 10 carries per game, that'd put him back up to number one. So they're running the ball a ton with Joe Mixon. Mixon got all 3 of the touchdowns last week. I mean, I do think Stroud was unlucky not to have a touchdown. I mean, they had a defensive touchdown and 3 rushing touchdowns. They're not going to rush all their touchdowns in this season, but they're pretty committed to Mixon on the goal line. I mean, there was a couple of times where he wasn't even able to punch it in, and they just kept giving it to him. So I'm off Stroud this week.
All right, moving on to our crystal ball picks.
With the crystal ball pick of the week for me, they have benched Daniel Jones. Tommy DeVito, not Danny DeVito, but Tommy DeVito will be the starter for the Giants, and it's going to be another get-right game for Neighbors. Malik Neighbors, I think he's 4th in targets this year, but he's 1st in average targets per game with 11.8 targets per game. That is number 1 in the league. He was compared heavily to Marvin Harrison Jr. at the beginning of the year. Marvin Harrison Jr. is averaging 6 catches a game, so half the amount as Malik Neighbors. So let's go Malik Neighbors. Let's keep slinging it. He's going to look at his number 1 option and just keep throwing him the ball over and over and over, and they're going to be losing. So they're going to keep throwing him the ball the whole game. Marcus, who you got?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Bo Nix. I saw an interesting stat just looking at some waiver wire articles today, and Bo Nix is available in over 50% of fantasy leagues. I think he's going to be an easy top 10 quarterback this week. The Raiders are a great matchup when it comes to that. Just coming from what Bo Nix can provide, we like those guys that can rush. Bo Nix is not afraid to just get a whole bunch of yards on the ground, 50 plus, 60, 70 plus rushing yards. Those add up. Just throw a couple of touchdowns, and he's good to go. In his last 7 games, 5 of those he's had at least 17 fantasy points. In a year where it's hard to get production from quarterbacks, it seems like, that'll be an easy top 10. So there's people out there that are still probably starting Patrick Mahomes. I would rather start Bo Nix this week, I think. Probably just a bold call, another thing that blew up in my
Hot
face.
take
But
there.
it's just, I guess my point is that Nick shouldn't be a free agent. If you have Josh Allen on bye, I believe Bills have bye this week. Bo Nix should be your number one pickup there. If you have Jalen Hurts, Lamar, guys like that, obviously start him. But I think Bo Nix in for a really good game. He's been doing it, and he just sits in free agencies. Nobody wants to play him. I think this week there's no reason to shy away from the Raiders matchup. So give me Bo Nix.
What a world we're living in where it might be a good idea to play a rookie quarterback over Patrick Mahomes. But I think the logic's there. I don't know that I would trust him enough to do it. I will say I am a little nervous about Bo Nix coming back and robbing us of our Jaden Daniels Rookie of the Year pick. I think that gap's rapidly closing. So like the
Really?
Bo Nix call, I mean, look what Nix has done the last few weeks versus Jaden's last couple of games has not been that good. They do have a pretty light schedule going forward, so I do think Jaden can hold on to that. Do we have an odds update?
Yeah, we do. I mean, this is what it is right now. Plus, depending on where you
So
are.
around plus 400. I think that was recently like plus 1200 for Bo Nix within the last couple of weeks, and then I know Jaden Daniels was pushing minus 1,000. So that gap's definitely closing.
I think Brock
So
Bowers
Yeah,
is
Jaden's
most
got.
deserving too, though. But whatever.
is now the time to bet Jaden Daniels since that gap has gotten more favorable
I'm
for
not.
him to win this?
Well, I mean, I already have Jaden Daniels bet, and I'm not going to bet him at minus 400. If it came down to closer to even money or something like that, maybe. But um, I think Bo Nix is an interesting bet at that point. But anyway, not got off track here. I'm going to go with a similar idea as Marcus. I'm going to go with Drake May, rookie quarterback. Doesn't have as easy as a matchup, but similar to Nix, May has sneaky rushing potential, and getting those extra like 20 to 50 yards rushing a game uh, just adds up. You also have the Dolphins, who and you haven't really seen it as much this year, but one of the best things that can happen to your quarterback is the other team scoring like an 80-yard touchdown, because then your quarterback goes right back on the field down more points. So, Dolphins, they can score in a hurry. If that happens, you could get, kind of a shootout game with the Patriots. And, Dolphins have Jalen Ramsey and some good defensive backs, but there's no one receiver that you're really relying on the Pats either. So, probably not a guy that I'm going to end up starting in like a 10-team league, but super flex or maybe a 12, 14-team league, I think May could be a good option.
Sure. Moving on. Big Marty.
Justin Herbert. That's my pick. He has not had a fantastic season. He was probably, I would guess that his availability was probably pretty high until just a few weeks ago. He's been really great over the last 5 weeks. However, 279 passing yards or more in 4 out of his last 5 games. And this week he gets to play the Baltimore Ravens, who have given up the second highest yards per game. So I think we're going to continue to see him perform at a high level here. And I really like Justin Herbert. And actually, if your league's not past the trade deadline, or if he happens to be a free agent in your league, he has nothing but top 10 matchups for the next 4 weeks. So I think he's in for a really good stretch if you're trying to make a playoff push.
Hell yeah, everybody. What a show. What a show. Again, thanks for watching. Anybody closing thoughts, or I think we're pretty good.
Yes, special shout out to Jason. His birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday, Jason. Round of applause. If you're watching, make sure you're smash that like button and subscribe. We're growing this channel. We're on here live every Wednesday or Tuesday or Thursday.
We're probably
We don't know
off
what
next
day,
week,
but at
though,
least
'cause of
one
Thanksgiving.
day.
We're probably off next week because of Thanksgiving.
We don't have to tell them that. They can still tune in and watch
I
an
did
old
get this.
episode.
I did get this green wave hat for my birthday, so I'll share that. We're rooting for the
Green
Tulane
Wave? What's Green Wave? No, the
Man,
Tulane.
Yeah, what's that mean?
Tulane, dark horse for the
Top
college
20.
football playoff.
Yeah, top 20 in the nation now. I think they're really a long shot. I think Boise has to lose the next probably 2 games. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen. But
What about IU?
Oh man, I root for the Green Wave. It's the only college game I ever went to. Cheapest beer in the country, actually, just so you know. You can get
What is it?
Tall Boys of PBR for $2.75. A college football game. I mean,
So
that's
they're
it.
doing pretty good at those games. They're getting wild.
Oh man, I was hammered. I was so hammered. I walked back to my house. It was a great time. And then nowadays, you go to any other stadium, I feel like you can't get a beer for less than $9. We were just at the
Yeah.
Pacers game. I feel like that beer was probably what? That was at
12
least $1.
bucks, 13 bucks,
Yeah, you'll
14
spend
bucks.
more than your ticket.
Oh no, Green Wave all day, baby. Yeah. So like, comment, subscribe. Again,
What
thanks
is
so
it?
much. Eric,
Let's do
say
it.
something.
Let's go. Come on, baby. Come on, baby.
All right, kill it. Kill it, dough.